welcome to the Escapart Podcast. My name is Stuart and thank you for listening. This week we're doing two podcasts. The reason for that is we're making up because last week we had a break and the week before we were setting up for the United Kingdom Escape Artists Convention. Just want to take this opportunity to thank everyone who attended Northampton and a big shout out to everyone that took part and competed for the Mick Hanslick Trophy. It was an absolute honour to meet you all. It was a pleasure to work with you and to once again see the club grow. For those of you who are interested in the United Kingdom Escape Artists, tap the name into Google. You'll find them on Facebook. You'll also find their website. Please make some inquiries. They genuinely are a wonderful bunch of escape artists based in the UK, and as long as you're civil to them, they'll be civil to you. And that's the same rules with this podcast. If you disagree with something I'm saying, if you have a difference of opinion, please be civil and I'll have a civil conversation with you. That's all I can ask. This is the more escape-focused podcast of the two we're launching. We're doing a media one over on the other channel, on the YouTube channel, and it'll be following on shortly. And it's literally just an insane fan theory that coincides with the imminent release of The Force Awakens on Blu-ray and DVD. But if you just want to sit back and talk about escapes, this is the channel for you. What we're looking at the moment is there will always be anxiety over what direction the art wants to go in. Is this an art? Is this an art form? Do we treat it and be artistic? Do we start moving away from doing shows? Do we do performance art in museums? This is a reoccurring conversation, and it comes up not because of any sort of dynamic movement, but purely because that's where the art seems to be drifting towards. And I'm not talking about watercolours, I'm not talking about Monets, I'm talking about the art not just as a physical performance, but an appreciation of what it inspires. Please bear in mind, we talked about the other media channel, the other podcast. Batman is a wonderful example of a media creation, of an artistic creation that draws heavily on the definition of an escape artist. He is a normal human being. He has to use tools. He has to use developed skills. He doesn't have a superpower. Unlike Superman, who is the personification, for lack of a better word, of magic, in that he has something that transcends what is normal. When you look at an escape artist is just that, a human being. Yet he is able to reproduce effects that seem almost magical, but he is not magical. And therein lies the rub. As artists, we inspire other artists, and in other fields. Our art form has inspired many action heroes, be it MacGyver on TV, all the way through to James Bond. But the fact is that very little recognition of that inspiration takes place. It is a tragedy that great performers and great performers are not recognised in their lifetimes. And there are wonderful performers out there. I have met several who should be household names and yet aren't, because TV right now is filled with reality TV shows. From my point of view, Escapology inspires artistic creation. It inspires photographs, it inspires comic books, it inspires works of fiction. I genuinely love the notion that an art-inspired exhibition can take place. There was one in my hometown a few years ago. It ran for 3 weeks. The footfall was not great, but then again, it is an art exhibition. So the footfall is never going to be great unless you are a name, unless you are a Damien Hirst, or it is a Monet, or it is something worthy of the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. So by footfall alone, you can't judge things. What it did do was open a lot of doors locally for people to have conversations about escapology, because it got them to stop and think. It's got them to think that it wasn't just X, Y and Z. It could be other things. And that led on to other bookings, which in turn is what the whole process is about. It is about spreading a message. It is about generating awareness of the art form. And to this day, my art is still available for download for purchase via Saatchi online. If you want to go into Google, tap in Escapart Saatchi online, it will come up, and you'll see photos that have been inspired by Escape, some physical objects, some small sculptures. All of these are things that have been my attempt to try and move the art in a direction that I felt it was moving in anyway. Sometimes you do need to evolve, and sometimes evolving means something happening that you do not actually want or plan to happen. It's finding out that the next step you have to take is in a direction you hadn't expected. You can tiptoe into it, you can drift into it, you can slowly lean into it, but the reality is that sooner or later the art will move in that direction. And this leads me to the second point. The second point is that, as ever, there is always a discussion about the use of Harry Houdini's name. And this comes down to its public domain. My understanding, having looked into the history of Laurel and Hardy and the ownership of that name, because the rights are disputed. Some people say that they belong to the heirs of Laurel and Hardy. Others feel that it belongs to Larry Harmon, who also owns the right to Bozo the Clown. The way it works is that, depending what state you were in America, when you passed away, your rights either lived on for a period of time after your death, or they didn't. And New York was one of the states where it didn't, and Harry was registered in New York. In California, where Hollywood has sprung up and insists on owning everything to do with your image, then we had an issue, because Stan Laurel passed away when the law said his rights transferred to no one. His rights to his image died with him. Back in the 80s, they retrospectively said, hold on a moment, we'll do it all the way back to the 1930s. And in that way, they were able to backdate claims. And that led to the confusion over who owned the rights to Stan Laurel's and Oliver Hardy's image. Marilyn Monroe wasn't registered in California, which is why her image is everywhere. That's why we have this question mark over who has the right to use the name Houdini. Until someone registers every trademark in every territory and has the money and has the resources to do that, and can make the brand be controlled and has a single vision for what they want the name Houdini to be, sooner or later someone is going to do something with that name that you think, that's brilliant, or you think, that's rubbish. Therein is the problem, because there isn't a single voice, there isn't a single guiding principle, and you will always have disagreements. And again, I'll say this again, if you're going to be civil with me, I will be civil back. If you're not going to be civil, then I may not engage, or I may not be civil back, and you may not be glad that you were. But if you're kind, if you're polite, if it's a polite comment, feel free to make it, and I'll listen. This brings us full circle, because there are those who don't like the idea of Escapology becoming more artistic, it going beyond the fairground, it going beyond the guy on the street corner busking. But that's the way the tides and current take us, and we can fight it, we can resist it. But equally, until there is a single unifying vision, until there is a single policing body, and right now there isn't, even in magic there isn't, then we are going to face times when we are drifting in directions that we never thought we would have to go. But right now, I like the direction of art as Escapology and Escapology as art. Look at the name of the podcast, it's kind of a clue. I love the idea. I will laugh hysterically if an escape artist ever won the Turner Prize. I would leap for joy to see modern artists suddenly up against people who can do things practically in the sense of a Damien Hirst versus a Harry Houdini. I would love to see that. I would love to see people who have never given our art form anything other than a disdainful side glance, suddenly confronted with it in all its glory. That would be hysterical. It would be fantastic to watch the news programmes, the South Bank shows, the BBC Fours, all suddenly having to go, we don't know much about this. Oh gosh, what do we do? How do we register this? Is there an art form? How do you draw it with a pencil? These sort of things that would be wonderful for the art, because we can be inspired in many, many ways. We can be inspired by reading a book on Houdini on a wet playtime when you're 8 years old. You can be inspired by watching the Hollywood film with Tony Curtis. You can be inspired by buying a transformer called Getaway that turns out to be an escape artist and you never knew when you bought it. And yes, that toy does exist. It's a Generation 1 Power Master, but that's a completely different discussion. But I just want to leave this thought that next year there are two amazing opportunities for this art. Firstly, we have an international convention hopefully happening in America, and full support, big shout out to everyone there. And secondly, we have an art exhibition taking place in Scotland, and this is what I want to talk about. And credit where it's due, a gigantic and huge shout out for Andy Robertson, member of the UKAA, hard-working individual. He runs the DeVal website. Please take DeVal Tribute, I should say. Please check it out. Go onto Google, tap in David DeVal Tribute. You'll see the website. It's full of amazing information. No spoilers, but it's brilliant. Go there and support that website. Click on some of the links. It is a brilliant site and full of incredible information about one of the most underrated escape artists of his generation. But I digress. Next year, May 2017, we have a opportunity whereby escape artists and artists can come together. And what has happened is the East Kilbride Art Centre in Scotland for May will have an exhibition of Escapology and Escapology related items. And this is an amazing opportunity for the art, where we can stand up and say, look at us, this is our memorabilia, these are our props, this is art inspired by our art form. And it's an opportunity for the public to see it in a different location. It's an opportunity for the public to look at it and go, wow, that looks interesting, or oh, there's a human being hanging upside down from a frame, or ouch, that looks painful. All the things that we see spectators do whenever we perform. But equally, it's an opportunity for us to engage with an audience that we don't normally get to see. It's, for lack of a better word, we will be engaging with a new crowd. And as artists have said, you go where the crowds are. You can't complain that the crowds aren't coming to the venue because the crowds are ignorant. You've got to go where the crowds are. And again, huge shout out to Andy. Well done. Very proud of all your efforts. It's absolutely amazing to see this opportunity come up. And if you get an opportunity, please go and support it. And that's it. That's the very short, he says, ramble for this week in the world of Escapology. And again, if you disagree with what I said, if you've got a problem with what I've said, get in touch, be civil, and I will be civil back. Come in kicking and screaming. You might not like the reaction you get. As ever, the Escapart Podcast is available for download on Stitcher, via YouTube, or on Buzzsprout. Thank you for listening. I'm Stuart Burrell, and this was the Escapart Podcast.